Hello and welcome to the 52nd Adoption and Fostering Podcast with me, Scott Casson Renee, and him,
Al Coates. Yeah, I was bubbling with enthusiasm there.
You are. You're
Yeah.
a bit giddy tonight, I feel.
I am giddy. We've just put up our Christmas tree.
Oh,
Well, I feel the same, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I'm just not in it. I'm never in it. But anyway, we can talk about that, can't we? So how are you, Al? How's things? How's tricks?
Tricks are good. All tricks are good. I was thinking about the podcast, and I was thinking, I have this irresistible urge to say, "Oh, it's just so miserable," but actually, I thought, no, I'm gonna
Or just your life in general.
just my life in general. No, but I thought I'm gonna actually be positive. I'm gonna be very positive, and there's lots of good things, really exciting things happening. So yeah, life is good. Life is good.
It's good. Well done, you.
If I say it enough, I believe it.
Yeah, well, but there does come a point, doesn't there, where you just think, is this my life? Oh, yes, it is, so I better just make the most of it. So.
Oh, that's really depressing.
Oh, dear.
Managing expectations.
Anyway, listen, yeah, so we'll chat a bit more, but you've had feedback that people just prefer to listen to the guests than us, so should we just crack on?
That's not what they said. They said they prefer if we cut to the chase, and then we...
So let's cut to the chase!
Let's cut to the chase. This week we have a special guest, Annie, who is also known as Safeguarding Survivor, who is quite vocal and active on Twitter. There you go.
She's lovely, actually.
Have you met her?
I've never met her, and I was really gutted that I couldn't take part in the interview, but sadly moving house. But I've had a lot of communication with her over Twitter on various topics, actually, mental health, suicide, all that sort of stuff. So as well as the care system, and I really, really do relate to her, actually. So I'm chuffed to bits that you got this interview with her, because she is fascinating, actually.
Yeah, really balanced. A balanced conversation it was. I know her because I met her at the Great North Run, which is a really abstract way of meeting. Yeah,
bizarre.
That is random. She was running for the Family Rights Group with.
Okay, yeah.
I want to say Kathy Ashley. Is it Kathy Ashley?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it is Kathy Ashley, and so I ran for them. If you remember do you remember my short films?
No, I didn't know you then.
Oh, right, okay. Anyway, so I met her. I met her at the start point because she was running for Family Action as well, and she literally left me standing.
Family Rights Group.
Family Rights Group. Yes, sorry. Ooh, awkward. So
it's a bit this week. Whoops. Anyway, go on.
I got an email. Well, that's on my list of things to talk about. I got an awkward email. I will pick your brains on that later. So I met her through there, and then I often, like you, I have had some fantastic interactions with her online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. And she's amazing, but people need to listen. Yeah. To see what we see, I think.
So we'll cut to the chase, and we'll put on the interview, and then we'll maybe round that up and see what people think. So here we are. This is Annie, Safeguarding Survivor.
Press play now.
I'm just have to tighten the C90 with a pencil. The kids won't know what that means.
No, they won't.
The kids won't. Here we go.
Well, hello, Annie. It's fantastic to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for bringing biscuits.
There's many things that I'm good at, but bringing biscuits is one of my superpowers.
They were absolutely lovely, and I will lie to the children and say that I bought them.
If there's any left.
If there's any, well, yeah. I mean, there wasn't actually that many, to be fair. There was only about 5 in there, so.
Well, quality biscuits.
Yeah, they are. They're rather chunky.
Excellent. Well, I'm really, really looking forward to speaking to you, and we've met a few times, different places and stuff. But could you explain who you are and why you do what you do? What do you do?
Well, what I do broadly, I suppose I write, although I don't do a massive amount of that these days. But I've written a parent's guide to the child protection process from my perspective, and that's as a mum who has been through the process myself. So what that looks like for me, I have had years of involvement with the local authority, both me as a child, so I was in foster care and was a care leaver. Myself then became a mother at 16 to my son. We had a long period with no social work involvement, but because of experiences that happened to me when I was a child that ended up with me being removed into foster care, that started to come to the surface an awful lot more in my early 20s, and my mental health really started to deteriorate. And I sort of gathered more children. I ended up at 23 with 4 children as a single mum, and it was around then that I really started to struggle, both sort of physically, with just the capacity of looking after 4 kids at 23, but also I think everything that had happened in my past was starting to impact on my everyday life, and it was really hard because there was nowhere to hide, because I was like butter scraped over too much bread. I was spread so thinly that that is a direct quote from Lord of the Rings, by the way. That's not mine. I forget whose it is.
Just take it.
I'm gonna have that. That's my butter scraped over too much bread. But I was spread so thinly physically, looking after these children and doing the best that I could, that I was emotionally neglectful towards myself, but then I was also emotionally neglectful towards my children. I made some really poor relationship choices, because I was desperately, to be honest, absolutely desperately searching and seeking that family, that sort of, your mum, your dad, your 2.4 kids, despite me at that point having 4, I still wanted that sort of unit that you see, which is all rubbish, to be honest, media depiction. So that what would happen in relationships that I would be in, I would let things go. I would sweep stuff under the carpet. I would, just gloss over bad behaviour from men to me and to my children. I mean, nobody ever, my children weren't beaten. Nobody ever hit my kids. And I was able to physically meet their needs, but emotionally, I wasn't connected very well. I could intellectualise a lot and understand I am in a difficult relationship, but emotionally connecting to that situation was almost too difficult, because that meant that I would then have to act and take myself out of that relationship, which I couldn't bear to do, because that would destroy the dream. So I think I got into a massive cycle, mainly with 2 men. One who was the father of my youngest daughter, who I'll call Rosie to keep her identity safe, and my partner after him as well. But Rosie's dad I was with for 10 years, and we were very much in a really toxic relationship. He would leave, so there would be this big rejection. I would fall apart. I would self-harm or attempt suicide, and then he would come back and everything would be fine again, and all the time taking my children along the way, without really stopping to think or even allowing myself to think or feel how that might make them feel. So that I would see as being quite emotionally neglectful parenting on my part, and yes, bordering, well, certainly yes, in terms of the description of it, you would term it emotional abuse. I was emotionally abusive to my children by being neglectful to their needs. So whilst my children went to school every day, they had 100% attendance, they went to after school clubs and extracurricular stuff, they were well presented, they were intelligent, they lived in a clean home, they weren't physically abused, they certainly weren't sexually abused. There was another factor there that was missing from their childhood, and that was down to me. The local authority obviously got involved quite sort of, I was around about 2008-ish, and then we had a period of around 4 years of quite intensive involvement, where they did help me. They offered nursery places, they offered help, they offered services.
Can I ask about that? Because I think that obviously the podcast is from the different side of the story, and I'm just intrigued. Intrigue's probably the wrong word, but I'm interested to know what that's like. That knock on the door, wow.
It's really scary. I mean, see, for me, there's two parts to it. So initially, it wasn't scary. Initially, it felt, because I didn't have a family, because the local authority had been my family, it felt like I had a safety net.
Yeah.
So it felt reassuring. That knock on the door initially was helpful, and they did help me. They did provide services, and they did.
Yeah.
They were helpful to me, and I think I saw them as a safety net.
Right.
And
which is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is what we'd hope it would be.
Absolutely, and an extension of my parent. But actually, what I did was I came to rely too heavily upon them, and actually sort of outsourced some of my parenting, as it were, to them, with my children being accommodated by them at times when I felt like I couldn't parent. So, I mean, it would be no different than me asking my mum to have my kids for a few weeks if I was struggling. But it's quite different when it's the local authority, and I think I missed that initially. I missed that difference.
So there's that perhaps a little bit of naivety.
Total naivety, and this sort of trust in not misplaced trust. That's wrong, but the trust in, because they'd been my parent, they'd been my corporate parent.
Yeah.
So, and it's that blurring of boundaries. So
almost seeing them, I heard a phrase yesterday, almost like a corporate grandparent.
Yeah, without a doubt, that was what they were, and they were there to help, and that's how I saw it. So at first, I wasn't scared at all, and actually lent on them very heavily. And then when things didn't get better and I wasn't making progress, and actually things were getting worse, because me leaning on them almost became an enabling factor in my behaviour.
Right.
My behaviour kind of remained unchecked, as it were. So that then all changed on my sort of final suicide attempt, which was May the 2nd, 2012. And that was when the local authority went, that's enough. Right, we need to act now. And looking back, in some ways, I feel like they should have acted sooner, because they almost enabled me, which sounds like me just pushing responsibility onto them. I'm not. It was entirely down to me. But when that change came, it was shocking and terrifying.
Yeah.
And it was out of my control. And it was like a snowball running down a hill, it was like that. It was just gathering momentum. All of a sudden there was all these different people in the room. We were at some sort of child protection conference. Nobody explained what anything meant. I was in a completely different world, and that is horrifying. It's terrifying.
So that escalation from what was support to a kind of a very different...
Really different.
Different questions being asked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's because you I'm trying to describe what you do. So what do you do now? Because you're in a different place now.
Very different place now. So we went through proceedings with my older children. I was pregnant with my youngest child. He was removed at birth after the proceedings concluded, with some of my children being placed at home with me, and some of my children being placed in foster care. One being placed with a father, Rosie being placed with her father. And so my newborn was then taken at birth, an ultimate plan of adoption from the local authority, because they felt that I hadn't had time to do the therapy that was recommended in the first set of proceedings.
So that must be really, in the midst of you, sounds like you were quite unwell. That's not helping.
Not at all. And it's dreadful, because you're putting in this sort of whole 26 weeks thing, you're putting such pressure on parents to not only realise where they're going wrong, but recognise their behaviours, understand the impact of those behaviours, internalise all of that, reflect on all of that,
and then
turn it all around, whilst going through court proceedings where you're parenting and everything about you is scrutinised. You're attending contact, you're being watched over and checked over then. You go into assessments, you go into court hearings, you go into meetings. It's a full-time job, it really is. And so we're putting an awful lot of pressure on parents to change their life. And I guess I started writing after I went through the second set of proceedings with my newborn. He was returned to my care, and I started writing about a year later, when I finally felt kind of secure enough, I suppose, and safe enough to know that no bogeyman was going to come and take him again, and because that's ultimately how it felt. That they were going to come and steal him again. I still get scared that they'll come and take him again. But I mean, he's been home nearly 5 years now, so I think. But still, I won't stop worrying. Probably until he hits sort of 18, and then I can finally start to calm down, which is awful. But it's just life. It's just that you just live in constant fear that it may happen again. Because you don't think you live in a system where a baby can be taken without you having done anything to that baby. That just sounds Orwellian. It sounds mental.
And there's a whole, because there's a debate raging in sort of different corners, legal corners, social work corners. That idea of being punished for a crime that's not committed.
Absolutely.
And putting it bluntly,
how on earth you can answer that as a parent? If you're talking about the future risk of emotional harm. How can I counter that and tell you it's not going to happen? Because that's why my baby was taken, and those were the reasons that he was going to be adopted, was the future risk of emotional harm. So how on earth can I tell a court, a social worker, an expert that that's not going to happen? What have I got? I haven't got.
You can't
anything.
draw on your history.
No, because they're using that as evidence that it will happen again. So it's really difficult. And what I found in all of this, going through all of these experiences, was that there wasn't really anyone that I could go to who would be able to help me navigate the system.
Yeah.
I found fortuitously in our local area we have, I think you might know of them, Families in Care, who are absolutely amazing and are independent advocates for parents going through the child protection system. Now, I mean, that is like a needle in a haystack in England and Wales. It really just isn't there at all. It's not a service that's widely available at all. I am so fortunate that it is available, or was available, in my local authority. They've recently had their funding cut, so they're not now available in North Tyneside, which is very sad for North Tyneside families. But they were available when I was going through my proceedings, and it did help me to navigate. But it was, of course, professional advocacy. They were immensely helpful. I would not have got through my proceedings without them. My son would not be home without them. But there was no voice of a parent who'd been through proceedings to tell me how to survive it, which is exactly why I started writing. And now what I do broadly is I suppose, it's awful, it's the voice of parents, but I hate this, you're laughing away. But I guess I am. I guess I speak for a lot of people that can't. That's a massive responsibility, and I feel it very, very keenly, and I'm always very aware of that responsibility to other parents. So I don't do anything lightly. Everything I do is very careful and very measured and very well thought out beforehand, because I'm aware of this immense responsibility. But I broadly train social workers. I go to the people who work with service users, so whether that is social workers, health, education, voluntary organisations, and I train them from a parent's perspective. I mean, I've got kind of fingers in all sorts of pies at the minute, so I'm helping out with the social work regulator, the new one, Social Work England, which I'm really excited about to get in there and sort of help on that level. And then I'm also involved with the Family Justice Council now as the parent and relatives representative, where I will sit at the Royal Courts of Justice and hopefully make some real change, real tangible sort of change for families, to make that court process easier to navigate and easier to live through and survive. But what I also do is, for free in my spare time, she laughs, is I help parents, and that's why I started. And all of the work that I do now was not the work I did when I started. All the work I did when I started was to help parents navigate the system. And I've worked with so many parents, probably in the hundreds now, and it's all, I do it all for nothing. I don't ask anything of them at all, only their time and their trust in me. And I basically translate the system and help them to understand why the local authority are involved and what needs to happen to keep their children safe. And basically get the social workers out of their lives, because social workers don't want to be in people's
It's a universal
lives.
theme, isn't it?
Nobody wants anyone. So it's how do the parents learn what needs to change in order for social workers to sod off, basically. So that's broadly what I do. I'm working with families at present. I've worked with mums who have had newborn babies removed. That's always really, really hard for me because I can feel that. But every mum that I've ever worked with who's had a newborn removed has had that baby returned, and they're all now thriving. So it
sounds really rewarding.
It really is. It's I would be delighted if somebody did pay me. I'm not sure who would pay me, but I wouldn't necessarily need paying, because it's something that I needed, and I was really fortunate to get. So I want to give back. Really.
I said this when we were talking beforehand, and I think that one thing that your voice is, there's an element of people trusting your voice, because you're able to hold in tension the needs of services to keep children safe versus the needs of parents to understand that, but also do what they need to do.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's both sides need to work, and I think there's this sort of common misconception with that one side should move towards the other, and it should basically be social workers calling the shots, and parents should have to do X, Y, Z, and need to fulfil this and fulfil that. And what I'm trying and will continue to try throughout my career is to create a system whereby we both move towards each other. And there's an expectation of parents to start to understand why they're in the position they're in, because it hasn't come from nowhere. There are obviously times when it does, and times when social workers get it drastically wrong, but they are in the minority, and there are often concerns that are very well merited. So parents do need to understand that and do need to do some work around that. But also social workers need to recognise their role in it, and recognise that sometimes it cannot be helpful. Their involvement can be unhelpful, and how the impact that they have just by knocking on the door, just by coming into your living room, sitting down on the sofa, the impact that has on a parent and therefore on their children, on the wider family, is huge. And I think that is something that needs a lot more work. We need a lot more, I hear so much relationship-based practice and all the sort of buzzwords and stuff, and it's great, but I'm still hearing from parents where it's not happening, and I'm still hearing from social workers that they're not being given the space to be able to work in the way that they want to. So something's got to change, and I've noticed a shift from when I started this sort of 3.5, nearly 4 years ago. I can definitely see a change, but it's like incremental, teeny tiny changes, and so I'll keep going there. I feel like I still have a role to play, and I do think that I have a voice in that I can hold these two tensions, and nobody feels defensive. So parents feel safe enough to talk to me, to trust me with their life and their story, and social workers also find it easy to talk to me about the challenges that they face. And I think both sides kind of need to come together and recognise that we're all humans and we're all kind of struggling, but the them and us divide needs to just stop.
Because it's an adversarial system, isn't it?
It is, and once you get into the court system, it just gets worse. And how on earth, as a parent, you're supposed to be nice to somebody that's taken your child away. Like when the social worker it was actually a midwife that took my baby from me, but the social worker was obviously in the next room with the foster carers. So ultimately, the social worker through the court process. You know, it was the court that made the decision, but the social worker did take my child from me. I then have to be nice to that person.
Otherwise, you're seen as...
Yeah, otherwise I'm seen as difficult, uncooperative. You know, I have to be nice during contact. My first ever contact session after they took my baby, I just wanted to drink him in. I just wanted to spend time. I breastfed him. My eldest child was with me, and we barely spoke. And it was awful because there was a contact supervisor present in the room who was sitting taking notes, and she was really eager to know about the birth, and she wanted to know what had happened, and you know, and she was taking my time and attention away from my child, who admittedly was asleep in my arms, as newborns do. But I just wanted that time to just feel his skin on my skin.
Yeah.
And she was bombarding me with questions about the birth and how long did it last and what happened. And I knew that if I didn't answer these questions, or if I wasn't nice to her, that would be recorded. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting because I think that I speak to a lot of adoptive parents who, I guess we invite. I think I said again at the beginning that we as adopters and foster carers, we come to this willingly, and we sit with nice social workers and we eat nice biscuits and everyone's friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we've got something they want.
Yeah.
And then the experience of a lot of adoptive families, and when I say a lot, I don't mean 50%, but there's a cohort of adoptive parents who then experience the questions and the concerns when things don't go so well, and it comes as an enormous shock.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But also, when you're talking there about this adversarial, often adopters and foster carers they're given the paperwork in relation to why that child is coming into the care system, and it's often wholly negative.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, of course.
But that's the adversarial system, isn't it? It has to be. You can't go into a court and say, well, it's complicated.
Yeah.
They're good at this and they're not so good at this.
Yeah.
They've got to say.
Yeah.
They've got to wholly justify why they can't children go back. Anyway,
absolutely.
I'm talking and you're not. So
no,
that's a
but
rubbish interview.
It creates that. So if you're given that sort of idea, like I remember meeting a social worker once, and she said, "Oh, you know, I never read the files of anyone before I come out." You know, but she said that, and I've heard other people say it as well. But she, you know, I want to form my own opinion of people and stuff like that. But really, foster carers and adopters don't get that luxury. You know, they don't get to go, no, I don't want to read anything. I want to meet the family myself and make my own mind up. You know, that you know, as foster carers and adopters, you don't get that choice and that chance. And I think so they're missing a trick there straight away, in that, you know, we were just kind of thrown into the world of foster care. I met my son's and my newborn son's foster carers literally hours before he was taken. And I mean, it was so special, that moment, because the foster mum came in to the hospital room and we held hands and we barely spoke really, but I wanted to introduce her to my child and for us to share that moment, because I knew it wasn't her fault. But interestingly, the very first thing I said to her was, I haven't done anything to him. And she said, I know. She could barely speak actually through tears, but she said, I know. And I said, you will look after him, won't you? And she said, yes. And that was all it was. That was all it took. And we held hands, we squeezed hands. She went out of the room and she was sobbing. And my friends and my eldest son were all sitting there sort of open mouthed, like, well, why did you do that? She's the enemy. But she wasn't, you know, at all. And we continued to have a really good relationship, and right throughout I never saw her as someone who'd stolen my child, but I did feel like that. It did feel like that a lot of the time, and I was so jealous of the experiences that she was having, and I was so desperate to prove that I was a good mum to her as well, because I knew that she would have a view of me, and that's really hard. It's really difficult. In amongst everything else, you're dealing with real people and real people's feelings and those tensions and that sort of dynamic. And it, as a parent, as a birth parent, I can't speak for foster carers and adopters, but just as a birth parent, I know how hard that was for me. And I know that having now spent time with my son's foster carer since his return home, we've spent some time together, we've talked. I wouldn't say we're friends, but he's part of her and her husband are part of my son's jigsaw. They're part of his identity, so they will always be that special.
You can't remove that, can
never.
you?
I would never dream of it because it's not mine to remove. But it feels like a much more comfortable relationship now because I feel exonerated.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when my son was with the foster carers, I was constantly fighting to try and prove that I was good enough. And as I kind of have that, I have 2 children still in the care system who are under a care order, which I agreed to. And we have, we are not having contact at the moment. I hate that word, contact. We're not seeing each other at the moment because they've chosen not to see their family. There's a number of reasons for that. And it is difficult. And I am envious of the foster carers because I know that they are raising my children, my biological children, and I've had to accept that they are part of their family now, and I'm not mum anymore. And that's, Christ, that's really, really hard to a point to get to. Really difficult.
Yeah, and that's really honest of you. And I guess that's part of your story, why you write and why you speak, and I think that's really appreciated. And what are your hopes? What if you give you a wish list, magic questions, what would you like to change?
Oh God!
Where do you start?
Where do I start? I suppose it's about, so for example, after my son died, I had, as we've just been talking about, so I had a child protection investigation thrust upon me because my son killed himself in London. We live in Newcastle, and I made the decision to fly down to London to go and collect his body and drive him back home with a friend of mine. That was seen as odd behaviour, rather than paying £1,000 to funeral directors to go and for 2 strangers to go and pick him up and bring him home, which to me would be really odd. But it was seen by the British Transport Police as odd behaviour, so they referred it to social services, or children's services rather, who then decided to err on the side of caution and take it upon themselves to do a Section 47 investigation. And the impact of that, it began 5 weeks and 6 days after my son was killed, and the impact of that on me was, I can't actually begin to express how damaging that was. And that...
Because what does that investigation look like? I mean, what does it mean? Is it a phone call, a knock on the door?
Oh God! It began with a phone call, and we are going to be undertaking a Section 47. We've had a meeting. We're going to undertake Section 47, and I was absolutely horrified because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. In inverted commas, I hadn't, you
sort of just stepped out of normal.
Yeah, I'd done something that is perfectly legal under English law. It's just not done that often. And I did it because he was my son and it was my job to bring him home as his lamb. Nobody around me thought that was odd. Authorities did think it was odd. So they decided to undertake this Section 47 in respect of the 2 children I had living at home with me. And they came to the door. They came, they sat on my sofa. It was a very deeply uncomfortable experience for everyone. It felt very, what's the word? It felt very, I'm trying to think of the word, sorry. Well, you're under the spotlight yet again, everything, you're being scrutinised yet again. And you've been put under so much pressure at a time that I was already under immense pressure, trying to deal with the horror of what had just happened and trying to keep my own children in my care together and okay and stable, trying to manage the children who weren't in my care. They were okay, that they were stable, and everyone was as okay as they could be. Also running around doing funerals and, you know, and all sorts of things and contacts and, you know, so to have somebody come into your house at that point. Now I realise this is an extreme example, but I think that the general feeling is the same across the board when I have been investigated previously. And I was completely exonerated after the Section 47, after my son's death. You know, apologised to and exonerated. But quite frankly, the damage has been done, and never again will I forget the pain and the injustice that I felt. Not because I didn't have an insight into the damaging behaviours of me towards my children. That was not the case. But when I have previously had Section 47 investigations, and there has been good reason, and it has been down to my parenting, my behaviours, my choices, my decisions, it is really difficult to get your head round because you instantly are scared. You're scared because you know that these people have the potential to take your children away. They've got the power to do that. The media doesn't help because they gaslight, they terrify parents into not engaging. So they aren't helpful in the slightest, really. And so you let these people into your home. You don't know what the right answers are to the questions.
You say let.
Well, you don't have a choice, really, do you? To be fair, you know, I mean, if you don't let them in, they just go to court anyway. So if you've got to smile and make nice and make them cups of tea and not even spit in it or anything. You've got to be nice to them, you know, and you've got to answer their questions. You've got to be patient, and at the same time, you're still trying to get your head round this enormity which sits at the pit of your stomach. And sometimes with me, it did. I managed to release it, and I managed to sort of align myself with what had happened. But it sits at the pit of your stomach, and you know you've done something wrong, and you know maybe that you kind of haven't been the best
perfect
parent.
parent.
You haven't been the best parent, because who the bloody hell is, you know? But for whatever reason, there is a justification, and sometimes there isn't. And I know that people will listen to this who either have done absolutely nothing wrong and have had local authority involvement, or perceive themselves to have done nothing wrong.
It's a spectrum, isn't it?
It's a massive spectrum. I know I have people who criticise me, who say I don't listen to the people that have genuinely done nothing wrong. That is not true. There is certainly a number of people who have been poorly treated by the local authority who have genuinely done nothing wrong. I absolutely understand that, and I want to make that point really clear. However, for the most part, you do have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that fear that you haven't, that there is some truth in what they're saying. Now, because you've got that alongside the power dynamic that they have to take your children away, you naturally get defensive. So because you're frightened, you get defensive. You don't know the answers to the questions, and you don't speak their language. So you're creating this whole cauldron of rubbish in which you're just thrown into, like a big witch's pot of stuff, and you're just chucked in, and you're expected to be able to learn to swim.
And to make sense of that really quickly.
Yeah.
Sink or swim.
Sink or swim.
And do you think that's, thinking about the Section 47 in and of itself, I think the law is the law. But do you think it's implementation?
It's absolutely, I mean, you've got to think, first and foremost, are the children safe? Is there an immediate risk to harm?
Yeah.
All of that, it has to be done. And I think parents aren't stupid. You know, from my, in the sort of almost 4 years I've done this, and certainly from my background as well, I would say the public perception is that parents who are involved with social services, children's services, social workers, 95% of them are monsters. There must be. And I think that is, you know, a sort of a general, well, there's no smoke without fire, isn't there? There's got to be more to this and all of that. 95% of them, they've got to be these abusive monsters who are throttling their kids and beating them and sending them to school on, you know, empty bellies and all of this. And the houses are minging and whatever. That the public perception is that 95% of parents who have social care involvement have that, and 5% don't, and it,
that's the other headline, isn't
yeah.
it? Evil social services.
Evil social services
take children.
Take children away. So when actually
there's nothing in between.
There's never anything in between. But in reality, I would argue, I'd flip that on its head and say that probably 95% of folk involved with social care, the leading causes, as we know, the research has shown, it's emotional abuse and neglect are the two reasons, the main reasons why children are removed, adopted, fostered, whatever, looked after in whatever capacity. So those are the two main reasons. In my experience, 95% of parents involved with children's social care and who are having children looked after, who have intervention, statutory or voluntary, are not consciously emotionally abusing or neglecting their children. That's my experience.
Yeah.
That parents don't tend to set out. Today I think I'll emotionally abuse Billy. Tomorrow I might emotionally neglect Simon. We don't do that.
It's a confluence of circumstances,
Of
their worldview, their view of themselves,
their own experiences of parenting as well come into it, and that 5% of those families are purposefully neglectful.
Intently.
And that you will get that. We will never. This whole idea that we can eradicate child deaths is ridiculous. We will never be able to do that.
There will always be people who set out.
Of course, there will.
To do that.
I think, in talking about what I'd like to change, I'd like to change the public perception that parents that are involved with children's social care are monsters. We aren't. We are people who've had experiences that have caused us to behave in the way that we have. And whether that is substandard parenting from our own childhoods. Yeah. So, for example, I had poor parenting. I was emotionally, physically and sexually abused within my own childhood, and then I became a child of the system. So my corporate parent then should have stepped up and taught me how to become a parent, because that's one of the jobs as parents that we do. We teach our children how to become good parents.
So your version of normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And they didn't do that. And I got pregnant at 16, and I was still in foster care.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and I got turfed out. They ended my placement. I was about 3 months pregnant with Johnny, and they ended my placement. They put me into a women's refuge. My case was closed. I didn't have a social worker anymore.
So that raises questions about the ability of the corporate parent to parent. Because if I, as a parent, did that to a 16-year-old,
there'd be no
my daughter, then I would be under investigation, wouldn't I? So that's a complicated message.
The interesting thing is that same local authority comes back in however many years and says, but you're not good enough parent. And it's like, hang on a minute, mate. You were the one that was supposed to be parenting me in the first place and teaching me how to do all of this. And instead what you did was chucked me out, put me into a woman's refuge and left me to fend for myself. And at 16 years old, 4 months pregnant with my son, I went and sat in a housing office and refused to move until they gave me a council house, because I thought there's no way my son's starting his life in a bloody woman's refuge. It's not happening. And that wasn't good enough for my child. But I tell you what, from the local authority's point of view, it was good enough for me as a child, which I was at 16.
So really complicated narratives, isn't there? And I guess, I can see that there's a lot to go at. You've got a lot to just a few things to tinker around the edges. Yeah. And I know you're involved in lots of other stuff as well, and there's opportunities. And people are, we were talking about this before we started recording, about people are really interested in your voice.
Yeah.
Because it's you, but it's also that voice where you can hold those two things in tension. So can you tell me some of the things you're hoping to do?
I think, it's difficult because I can't travel as much now because of the way that Johnny died, and then my ex-partner, Rosie's father, also killed himself on the rails. So that's very difficult. I can't do what I used to do, and I used to have this idea in my head, which was perhaps a bit egotistical, of being able to train every social worker in the country and at least have them listen to me. They might not change their practice, but at least if they were willing to listen to a parent's perspective, it might just make them stop and think every now and again. I can't do that now because there's only one of me, and I'm needed
got things
here.
You need to do.
Yeah, I'm much more needed here than I've ever been. I need to be here and present for my family, and I can't do that if I'm, in
gadding about
the arse end of beyond. training social workers as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
So I think that I do have a message and a voice, and I need to be a little bit more creative nowadays with how I do that, which is why I'm doing things like this. I can do stuff with universities because I'm really interested in getting in there at the beginning, and would also extend that to frontline, and step up and say that I'd like to get in there, because ultimately they're all social workers. They're all going to work with families. It doesn't really matter how they get into social work; they're still social workers. And I'd like to at least hope that they can just stop and listen, and allow themselves to be vulnerable enough to hear my story and the story of many, many other people like me, and allow themselves to listen to that and really feel it. And there's a difference between listening to respond and just waiting for your turn to speak, as opposed to listening to then reflect. Yeah. And that's what I'd like. I'd like to be able to keep doing what I'm doing in very creative ways, because I can't do it the way I used to be able to do it, and hopefully be able to remind people that there are real human beings at the centre of all of this. There's a
different story to tell.
Yeah, there is, and we're all in this together. Ultimately, in the main, we all want what's best for these children.
Yeah.
And whether you are a birth parent, a social worker, an IRO, a social work manager, a foster carer, an adopter, a judge, a children's guardian, you've all got the same things in mind.
It should be.
It should be. I think other things get in the way. It doesn't help that the government keeps slashing budgets everywhere. That really doesn't help. And so I will make the point again that social workers are trying to do a job that they can't necessarily do because they're not being given the space and the tools to be able to do their job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess that's the nature of who you are. That's why I think people are really willing to listen to your voice, is that you are able to hold all those perspectives and kind of navigate through them and go, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people want to hear that. So that's fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
And the biscuits were good. And
they were good.
And the coffee was good. Thank you.
Well, I don't normally make very good coffee, so I'm assuming that you're lying, but you're a very good liar if that's the case.
Well,
have you drunk it?
I have. It's all done, yeah.
Wow, well done.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, good to see you, and look after yourself.
Thank you very much.
There you go. That was Annie, Safeguarding Survivor. What did you think about that?
What a lovely voice she's got. I've got to say, because I like a northeastern accent anyway.
You're fond of your dialects, aren't you? Fond.
Yeah, I am. I do like an accent. I love an accent, me. You could be the biggest idiots in the world, but as long as you've got a good accent, hence the reason I'm doing this podcast.
It's going to be a really long night, isn't it? I can tell.
No, it's not. But actually, just so relatable. She's so relatable. She really is. I mean, she's so balanced about her experience, and
very gracious.
It's God, I can't imagine what she's been through. Really, really can't imagine what she's been through, or what children have been through. And like I said beforehand, we've got something in common with kind of mental health and suicide. But take that part away, and just she is the kind of person that you could actually work alongside to work ways around these issues that we have with contact and all those kinds of things, where because she's had that experience, and yes, she's on the other side of it, but she does, and I know from stuff she's told me, stuff I've seen on Twitter, that every so often she has down days or down weeks, and she's affected by her experiences in life. But she's the sort of person that we need to this voice thing that we keep talking about, this is the voice that we need to listen to, because actually she's the one that can actually say to us, this is what you should consider, this is how you could do it, and this is, chuff off and do it, basically.
Yeah.
What else can you say? She's been there, she's done it, she's got the t-shirt and the hoodie and everything else.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and I think that's probably why she is so respected and listened to, is that she brings a really balanced view to stuff.
Definitely.
And she's a voice that is really worth listening to, because she's not in any way trying to canonize biological parents or villainize adopters or vice versa. She's
Exactly.
just kind of balanced, or foster care as well. And I think I work with a lot of. It's kind of part of my world is in that. But she just is able to hold attention of all of the real the nuancy stuff, the stuff that's this murky grey. Because most of this world, adoption and fostering and kinship care, it inhabits this centre ground where it's murky.
Yeah.
There's very few, cloak and dagger villains, and there's very few saints.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah, and we're all just trying to do what we have to do, and you've only got to look at Twitter, especially the last couple of weeks. I haven't been on much for good reason, because I've kind of fallen out of love with it a little bit. And there's a lot of criticism to kind of adopters. Maybe that's the reason why I've taken a little bit of a step back, because it's this thing, isn't it, that if we were all to work together rather than working on our own thing, so our own agendas, and I mean this in a kind way, to anybody who's going to write into the complaints department, which is Paula, but basically, if we're all kind of doing our own agenda, yes, there is still a very small amount of people who come into adoption wanting to be parents just to fulfill that need to be parents, but no, it's just not that way anymore. And
I'm not sure I agree with you. It may not be that way, but I think that the majority are still those people, aren't they?
I know, but it just really gets on my goat that people think that, once you've been in it for a couple of years, say, that you've still got this fantasy. And I don't think most adopters do have a fantasy that they can fix all the issues. I think everybody knows now that, you're going to have these issues and they're lifelong, and adoption isn't just about, up until the age of 18, because that's when I came into it, that's what I thought, and that's not right,
Is it that you didn't think that, but you never thought there was another way? You didn't sit and think, oh, when it gets to 18 they'll go off and they'll live their lives as young adults and they'll still be my children? Or is it that you, like me, I think that I just got this surprise, that this dawning realization as I got closer to 18 for some of my children, that actually things weren't going to pan out that way at all?
Well,
I don't know.
do we not get lost though? I think we get a bit lost as well, don't we? That's the thing, because we go through so much when they're grown up, and we do get lost into the kind of milestones that they might reach. So they've reached 16, they've reached 17. It's that stuff that you get pulled into, and you just think. And I don't know. I feel like I'm waffling a bit about this, but I just feel that we're all trying to do we're trying to do a thing that results in children feeling that they can grow up in normal surroundings, that they can be loved, even if it's not biological love. It's love, and it's there. And do you know what? We're always there for those children, even outside the other end. And I feel that I'm seeing more and more criticism of adopted parents on, especially Twitter, it's got to be said, that I just can't relate to in any way, shape or form, because I'm not doing this for the glory of it, and I'm really not. Yes, I post a lot of stuff on Twitter sometimes about some experiences and what have you, but actually I'm posting it to share with other adopters that actually, sometimes it can be all right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do agree with you to an extent, but I think that I see it perhaps a bit differently, because I think that the journey that I've been on is that actually I've become this dawning realization that I don't think how I feel about adoption has changed dramatically. So listening to people like Annie, you get a real perspective, you get a really different perspective, but you have to have a level of security to listen to that and not wobble, because actually, I mean, Annie's a different story because it's fostering. But those questions about what if a mistake was made, what if the system isn't working great, what if there is an injustice and my child is at the centre of that, and that is really complicated, isn't it? Really difficult for us all to kind of look into, and I've reflected on the experience of my children, and and wondered what is the real narrative that's gone through that, because it is, we've said it before, it's a combative system, so all the paperwork is wholly negative. But also, you know people, I know people, I am one person who's actually been through who's actually has had the kind of the nasty bite of the social care, and realised that all is not as good as it would be. I mean,
exactly.
And that's a voice that's rising up on Twitter as well, isn't it? A voice of people who've experienced the less than favourable side of children's social care. And that can be really difficult from an adoption perspective and a fostering perspective as well, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's right. You're right, and I think that's what I like about Annie and her messages. She's been through it. She's definitely been through it, and I would never want to take that away from her. But she's balanced in her perspective, and she's now trying to do good with that experience. And I think that's essentially what we want to do, which is why we put ourselves out there a little bit as well. So we're on the other side of it, of course we are. But actually, doesn't it show that, you know, Annie as having had her experience, she can sit in a room and talk to you, and she can converse with me privately and publicly on social media, because we're at different ends of the spectrum. In some ways, don't get me wrong. I know, you know, obviously her experience isn't of adoption, but it's still, you know, it's still relative, isn't it? And I think that's what I've fallen in love with about the fact that we can share these kind of events that go on in our life to make sure that people feel educated. It's a free platform to be able to do that, if that makes sense. So I think I've just talked my way around on that one.
Have you? You've changed your mind totally.
I've sorted my life out. There you go.
Excellent.
I've done it.
Well, there you go. That's the bill for this therapy session will be sent straight through to Tris, because I'm sure.
Don't talk to me about therapy.
Oh, nice segue into something there.
Yeah, no, I wasn't segueing. I was just saying, don't talk to me about therapy.
All right, okay. It's just a blanket statement. Just never talk to Scott about. Well, you know what they say: never talk to Scott about therapy. We've been having a therapeutic intervention, which is quite interesting.
That's what I was getting at, but yeah, I don't want to talk about it. It's too traumatic.
Well, actually, no. We've got EMDR, which is happening with one of my children, and it's genuinely transformative.
Oh, really?
Yeah, young adult. So they've made that sort of choice themselves, and they're kind of going through that. But actually, it's really odd to see stuff sort of falling away before your eyes. Really? So much so that we've just paid for the therapist. She's on staff now. She lives in the upstairs bedroom. She lives
in the quarters.
Yeah, she lives in the quarters, and
she takes care of the other three as well. The three little ones.
The three little ones. Paul and me, and Queenie as well, and the dogs. She's just working her way through the whole damn lot of it.
But it's not Fat John, is it?
No. Slightly awkward with Fat John because I emailed him and I didn't get a reply for a week, and I thought I'd maybe muckied my ticket.
Well, Fat John, if you're listening, it was all met in the nice possible way.
Yeah, I'm sure Fat John's working really hard not to be as rotund as he was.
Yeah, he's probably actually in therapy of some form himself by now.
Can we stop talking about it? I'm just making my skin crawl.
Do you know what? That's really interesting about the EMDR, because I've heard some really good things about that, and then some kind of, I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a 50-50 split on that. I've never heard anything really negative about it, but I've heard a kind of, I'm not sure because we've just started it, or da-da-da-da-da.
I think it's a tool in the toolbox, isn't it? It's one of those that you've got to... I know for us, you've got to have sort of memory. You've got to be able to kind of walk through it. So for some families, people, individuals, it works and some not. But it's really interesting. I don't know how it works. I think it's a form of voodoo. But other than that,
there you go. That's sort of reaction.
Yeah. Now we'll be getting a letter from the National Association of EMDR Specialists, and their lawyers will be on to me.
He said it, not me.
Yeah, I said it.
I'll be here next week.
Yeah.
Well, do you know, it's really interesting because Jacob's just started therapy this week as well, through our ASF application. Just to do a little plug there, which has been quite interesting actually, because we've been you have, I have through work, we've been asked independently to kind of come up with some ideas for the ASF, haven't we? But I can't fault it really, because this is the second round of ASF application. We had to wait a bit longer this time because it's obviously a 20-day application turnaround, isn't it?
Well, you're starting to sound like an infomercial now.
I know I'm starting to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Oh, who knew? Um, but yeah, so that started this week, and we actually got to choose a therapist as well, and which was amazing because I went for the one with sparkly
Honestly,
shoes.
there'll be people listening to this going, "He just so works for Adoption UK." He's so
That's
works.
not, but Adoption UK don't own the agency that I made my application through, so you know.
All right, that's fair enough. But
Yeah.
you do hold lots of secrets, and now I feel like you hoodwinked me
no.
because you let me rant on about Giff Gaff, and then as if by magic, you appeared all over the place. Pictures of you looking all sultry and moody in a garden with a cup of coffee for the Giff Gaff thing. What was all that about then?
I feel like I'm like sitting on the therapeutic naughty step now.
You
'Cause
blooming
I've got-
are. What?
Yeah. Well.
So what was going
Well, it
on?
was embargoed. There was a press embargo over it, so I wasn't allowed, right? And you know how these things work, so don't try and draw me
I
on.
do not.
Yes, you do. Of course you do. But basically, there was. Oh God. Okay. Well, I'm just going to spill it, and if I get sacked, then it's your fault, and you're going to have to pay my bloody bills.
You
for
get
the
in
next
line
6
with the EMDR people.
Exactly. So basically, as you know, it all kicked off on Twitter, and our CEO Sue, she made contact via Twitter. Stop doing that with your eyebrows. What is it? Is this a affliction you've got these days? Sorry, you can't see it, listeners. He's just doing strange things at the screen. So basically, Sue contacted him over Twitter and said, "Why don't you why don't you come and meet some of the monsters," or something. It was something quite humorous that she put back to them on Twitter.
Right,
It was public, so you can go and read it if you want. I can't remember the exact word. And Giff Gaff just basically engaged with us straight away. Now, bearing in mind, I was on holiday when all this kicked off because it was in half term, just before half term, and it all kicked off then. So I wasn't involved with it for the first couple of days, and thankfully I wasn't, because I dread to think what my own workload would have been like. But basically, they came and met us. They learned, and one thing I will say about Giff Gaff,
Mm-hmm.
love them or hate them, whatever your feelings are for them, they do their bloody homework now compared to that video, okay? Because I've spoken to them twice about two separate things, and they do their research now. They make sure that they know what they're talking about before they speak to you.
They've
yeah?
felt the wrath of the adoption community.
They have.
They should have talked to me.
Yeah, I'm sure they should have done. So anyway, long story short, they came up to Banbury, where our HQ is, and they met with us a couple of times, and they just basically did their homework on what adoption means in 2018. Now, having met two of them, I'm not sure whether I should name them or not. Oh, I'm going to name them anyway. So Layla and Abby from Giff Gaff, to sit in a room, and this is what will get me sacked, and see one of those ladies actually physically burst into tears because she was so upset about what had happened.
Oh hell!
Yeah,
That's a bit harsh.
Really, yeah, it was. And it, none of it was intentional. They just thought it was a humorous way to do Halloween, and obviously, the adoption community didn't think so. But essentially,
I mean, that's what Twitter wanted, though, on that afternoon, wasn't it? They wanted their heads on sticks, if we're frank. So if you were one of them people, then I hope you're pleased with yourself. Look what you've done.
Plus it caused a really big 5-10 minute rant last podcast as well.
Don't get me started.
But basically, yeah. So they did their homework, and then they came up with ways of being able to help the community. And obviously, they recognise that Adoption UK, what it stands for, it's a community. We, Adoption UK, we class ourselves as a massive part of the adoption community. There's obviously other sections of it, but essentially they understood that we were a charity, we needed fundraising, etc. And they came up with an offer to promote and raise some funds for Charity Tuesday.
30 pieces of silver.
Yeah, that well. However,
guilt money.
They have really helped us in terms of some of the marketing.
I saw that.
Breakdowns, yeah.
It was good.
We did a video. There was a couple of cuts in the video. I'm not going to say who they were, me. But you could have seen me in my tutu actually on stage being filmed, putting the tutu on. And you did, but that's because I sent you the wrong one.
All right. But I liked the pictures that they put of you, and I thought it was really good, and it was a positive message. So that was and it was done really professionally. It was really good.
Yeah. So so that's what happened. Obviously, I couldn't speak about it because the last podcast was a bit awkward because I couldn't I couldn't really respond, and I could have killed you for bringing it up as well.
How could I not bring it up?
Yeah. Anything else you want to throw at me tonight, Mr. Coates?
Oh, I could if I wanted. Come on, tell me your secrets, because you are like you have no secrets.
Well, we did talk about one beforehand, didn't we? But
I'm not sure we should go there.
Sure, we should go there. No, I think actually because we both have friends in those places, I think we should just leave that one as it is. Oh. Yeah, we do. Anyway, if anybody wants to know, just send Al a DM on Twitter, and if he grasses it all up, then
I'll tell anyone anything. A man with nothing to lose. That sounds really interesting. There's been a lot of documentaries about adoption. There was Louis Theroux's documentary, wasn't there, recently as well, about American adoption. Oh, I have to tell you. Sorry.
Can I just say before you go into any television, I haven't had television for 3 weeks.
Oh,
so I don't know anything about TV.
All right. Oh, well, I'll not bother going there then. That seems totally pointless. But I've been
20 minutes out of the car.
The podcast is becoming mildly international. I was looking at the stats today, and we've had 26 downloads from the Isle of Man, which is quite random.
That is international.
So
isn't it?
I'd like to speak to our Isle of Man listener.
We need to do a direct.
Yeah, we're available to come over because we fancy visiting the Isle of Man. Yeah,
we do.
We could do a little road trip.
Yeah, we could, and then we could interview you while we're there.
Yeah,
and see what sports like in adoption land and Isle of Man.
That'd
it
be
could
perfect, yeah.
potentially be someone who was just there for a holiday. So you know.
Of course, yeah. Oh well.
However, if you are there, then welcome. We love to think that we've reached Isle of Man.
Excellent, the giddy heights. But I got contacted by a couple of an adopter and a foster carer from the good old US of A.
Yeah, this is going to take over from my dream of going round the USA on a road trip and interview doctors and foster carers. Isn't
crazy dream. But they got in touch with me and they told me their stories, and I have to say I was genuinely gobsmacked. So they're coming up in adopter stories and foster care stories. Because I feel like they're quite popular, aren't they? And they're different. They're not us doing this. That's fine. We're just prattling on now. Well,
yeah, you are.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've got anything else to say. I think we should maybe call it quits. We've got the Christmas edition coming up soon.
We have, which is obviously taking a lot of preparation, doesn't it? The marketing team and
Yeah, I've been making those paper chain decorations that run across rooms. You remember when you were a kid and you used to do that?
Yes, I do remember them.
Lots of licking and sticking. So we're doing that.
Have you not got kids for that? Why are you doing
My kids don't do a single thing I tell them. Honestly.
Well, before we go, can I just say,
please do.
Obviously, this is the first podcast that I've recorded because the last one we did when I was staying away for work, so I was in a hotel. But this is the first one in my new house since we've moved.
Castlemaine Acres.
Castlemaine Acres has moved slightly down the road. And can I just say, there is some times in life where you just don't realise. I'm not saying this for everybody to go, right, we're selling up and we're moving, but as your family grows older, your needs change, and it's not until you're living in different circumstances you realise just what that change was. Does that make any sense? I don't know if it might make sense, but
I know what you mean.
I do have an example for you because I worked it out today actually. I was chatting to somebody today, and basically, when we lived in our old house we lived in for 10 years, and we did it to our specification 10 years ago. So, we built walls, we knocked down this and built that, and
velvet padded wall.
Yeah. And we did all that.
Optics.
But no, it wasn't an alcoholic back then. I didn't have teenagers back then.
You've said enough.
I have. I did that bit. And what was really strange is because we designed the house around the needs of our family. So we had a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old back then. And now we've obviously got a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 12-year-old. What we didn't realise when we designed that house, in terms of the build, was that actually they would grow up. And there'd become a time where they wouldn't be going to bed at 7 o'clock or 7:30 or 8 o'clock when we would get adult time. So for the last couple of years, what we've missed was not being able to sit somewhere of an evening chatting,
without them.
as a couple.
Yeah. No.
Because they're always bloody well there.
Oh.
So what we found is that we've actually got, because we are only here temporarily, but this kind of helps us in terms of our next, the next
Thinking
move that
about
we
what
make.
you want.
Exactly what we need, because actually we are going to, we've obviously got oldest who's moved out and is living independently. Middle one, since we've moved here, because we're further away from where we used to live, so he's got a long-term girlfriend, and he's spending half the week here, half the week there, which is fantastic. It's fantastic. It is fantastic because he's not here for half the week. And I mean that the loveliest way, because when he is here, he loves being here, and we sit and have conversations.
And he gets the best of you.
Yes, exactly. But what is really strange is that we can stand in the kitchen, which has been designed by somebody else for another family, but it suits our needs now. So that if Jacob is in the lounge watching telly at 7 o'clock, watching his rubbish that he's downloaded on Sky Plus for 50 million hours and taking up all the space, but we can stand in the kitchen and shut the door and have an adult conversation. And it is a revelation. It is a blooming revelation. So, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I think that we came to that really early on, because when we first adopted, we had 3 children. There was Anne in a wheelchair, and then there was Paul and I. And within about a year, we realised that we just didn't work in that house. So we kind of moved into somewhere that really facilitated peace and harmony. And then we've moved since then, but again for very similar that built the idea that the built environment can really impact on the dynamics of. So we've had a lot less tension in this house. We've removed a lot less anxiety, and so I think that is something that when you look at the people's support needs, for us, I think I've probably said it before, that with the fact that I've got a kilometre track to tarmac means that one of the huge anxieties where we had a child who was running out, I know that she knows as well that she won't go that far. She'll never get into danger. So we're away from people, which is one of the issues that cause anxiety. Kids playing out, seeing them. So, but when you talk about adoption support needs, people don't talk about that.
You don't think about that, do you? Yeah.
No.
And I just think it's really quite relatable. And I mean, there's going to be a couple of people who are listening to this going, yeah, that will happen for us. But actually, it's just a story that needs telling, really. Sorry it sounds a bit monotonous, yes, I'm sitting in a lovely house and, it's better than the one we had and all that sort of stuff, but we don't own it, but, never mind.
It's just unpacked, I have to confess, from where I'm sitting.
I know. I did it in mega quick time. Bear in mind, we moved over 5 days. So as stuff was entering the house, I was unpacking, putting away.
No, I said it looks unpacked.
Oh, it looks unpacked.
As in looks...
Well, yes. I mean,
there's a lot of boxes behind you.
You're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. There's 12 memory boxes, which are kind of
yeah. That's a lot
for
of
all
memories.
3 children. Yeah, I know.
12.
Yeah, 12.
How have you got 12 memory boxes?
Just bear in mind, I'm a hoarder.
Oh,
and everything. So it's like first paintings.
The whole lot.
Yeah, the whole jing bang. Yeah, nothing has been thrown.
Oh, that's terrible. You're making me feel bad because I'm like Mr.
How many have you got?
Memory boxes.
One for all 6.
I've got a matchbox that we share between the lot of us.
And if something's put in, something's chucked away.
Yeah, one in, one out. You can keep whatever you want. As long as there's just one of them.
It's in that box. Yeah, exactly. No, that's what you can see in the background. Everything else is actually, I've got 3 boxes to empty this weekend, and then I'm done. And bearing in mind, we spent that week, and we've not stopped since, because obviously, conference, moving, work.
You're a very busy bunny. I have remembered that I have kept some things. I keep my children's teeth, which is almost creepy.
Oh, no. I'm going to make a confession.
What?
Because I do the same. The problem that I've got is they're all in the same box.
They're all on a necklace.
No, they're all in the same box.
That's what
I don't know whose is whose.
And it's slightly creepy.
Yes. And do you know why I think I've done it? I think I've done it because my mum used to do it. I've copied that.
That's
And
really
who
weird.
wants to see, like these manky old teeth in 20 years' time?
I know. Paula goes mad with me, absolutely mad. She goes, "What the hell have you kept these for?" And I go, "I don't know, but I feel I need to keep them."
So you've got a matchbox for each child's tooth.
No, like yours, they're just in a
Really,
big
just
heap.
in one. Yeah, that's terrible,
Makes
isn't
me
it?
look like a serial killer.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Anyway, there you go,
Well,
listeners.
yes.
That's the opinions of Alan Scott on teeth, memory boxes, and moving house.
There you go. And so
Boom.
we'll have one more episode. The next episode will be the Christmas episode, which will be very exciting when we decide what to do. And then after that, we're definitely going to do something on autism, and we might do something on autism for Christmas. We might do something digital. Yeah. We've got all kinds of people lined up, so that's wunderbar.
Got some mental health stuff coming up as well from an adoptee.
True that. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Nice to hear from adoptees. Another controversial issue. Adopters speaking to adoptees. Let's not go there.
Who knew? Who knew?
Oh, inconceivable that we could talk to them. There you go.
So, but before the next one, it would just literally be the week before Christmas, wouldn't it? It would be Saturday, the 21st. So,
that's exciting.
Or 22nd, yeah. So, we better save all our fun for then.
Oh.
So it'll be the podcast Christmas party stroke podcast, won't it?
Yeah, let's not build our hopes up, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, well, I'm going to go because I've got things to do.
Yeah, and I need to go and speak to nice people. So,
okay, right.
Lovely chatting.
As always, the pleasure was all
Goodbye,
yours.
listeners.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.